Hello, Martin.
Good evening. Welcome to the virtual Ramadan event organized by Dialogue Society with Fellowship Educational Society and the Oxford Foundation. My name is Anand, a volunteer of Dialogue Society, and I am your host for today. Last 2 years have been marked by COVID-19 and the impact it has had on everyone in the UK and the rest of the world. Our thoughts and prayers are with everyone during these unprecedented times, with a special mention to the NHS staff, all key workers and their families who work relentlessly to overcome this pandemic. There is no doubt that without their dedication and altruism, we would not be able to overcome this crisis. In accordance with the government guidelines, the Dialogue Society and the Fellowship Educational Society have had to cancel all its upcoming events, in particular the Ramadan dinners, which we all love, which take place every year. However, we will not be defeated, and thanks to technology, we are able to get together tonight. We will stick to our format and theme of Ramadan events, and tonight's theme is rekindling community spirit in Oxford. I would like to welcome all our distinguished panelists and let everyone know that we anticipate finishing this event no later than 8:30 p.m. before iftar, which is the fast breaking. I would like to start with Lord Lieutenant of Oxfordshire, Tim Stevenson. A very warm welcome. Could you please share your thoughts about the theme of this event, please?
Thank you, and good evening, everybody, and thank you for involving me in this very special event. Rekindling the community spirit, what a perfect theme that is for this virtual Ramadan event, an event generously organised for us all by Oxford's Muslim community and the Dialogue Society in particular. These things do take a lot of organisation, and I know we're all very grateful for the work that's gone into it. And the theme and the timing of this evening could hardly have been arranged at a better time. The daily practice of fasting during Ramadan, combined with reflection and prayer, followed at the end of each day with a family or communal iftar of eating and celebration, brings together, I think, the key elements of an approach we all need to follow as we start to emerge from the dark tunnel that COVID has represented for many, perhaps for most of us, to a greater or less degree over the last 18 months. And we have to be honest with ourselves and say that it has been dark for many families, with the combination of death and economic dislocation, unemployment registrations significantly up, increase in domestic violence, the real challenge to their schooling for young people and young adults, the worrying increase in mental health challenges for young and old at both ends of the age range, where there's concern about the potential increase in hate crime, of addiction, and of isolation for the old. But, and the but I think is a very big one, despite these challenges, what we can say is that it's all been far less dark than it might have been, but for the very broad sense of community which the pandemic has provoked and which our Muslim communities have played such an important part in. During last year and during Ramadan in particular, Muslim communities have come together, and as this evening demonstrates, also able to bring together people from all faiths and none. The community spirit was certainly kindled at the height of the epidemic last year. And we can really celebrate that and thank and acknowledge all those who organised and encouraged the wonderful community response to providing support, help, food, and particularly encouragement to those who most needed it. And will continue to need it as during this year, this Ramadan, and maybe even the Ramadan following that, the crisis evolves, hopefully, to a final conclusion. Of course, it's critical that we all stay positive, that we do indeed rekindle the community spirit that we found last year, looking beyond current challenges and always remembering the key COVID lesson of delivering community action to those most in need of support. My sense is that although we're all of us tired now of the necessary restrictions and pressures of COVID, that community spirit is still very much alive and ready to be kindled. As Her Majesty the Queen's representative in Oxfordshire, this is my opportunity to thank everyone here in this virtual iftar, both the presenters and everybody who's listening to the evening online, for their work and tireless commitment to the needs of others. It is sad, of course, that we can't be together next week for what otherwise I know would have been a wonderful Eid celebration, but this gathering together online is, I think, a very good substitute. Thank you all for making it happen. I'd like to finish by casting back to some words that Her Majesty the Queen used in April of last year, where she said that every hour of work and commitment brings us closer to a return to more normal times. While we have faced challenges before, this one is different. This time we join with all nations across the globe in a common endeavour, using the great advances of science and our instinctive compassion to heal. We will succeed, and that success will belong to every one of us. We should take comfort that whilst this is last April, we may have more still to endure, better days will return. We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again. And I think this evening is a demonstration of that and the way in which we are emerging from this serious crisis that has affected the whole world. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Lieutenant, for sharing your thoughts about the theme of the event and for, I guess, putting forward how important it is to keep hope in times like this. Thank you very much again. Our next speaker is the Lord Mayor of Oxford City, Councillor Mark Ligo. Welcome to the virtual Ramadan event. Could you please share your thoughts and your work for our city?
Thank you very much. First Ramadan and Dialogue Society event. Tim Stevenson's touched on some of the things I was going to say, but what I'm going to do is use this opportunity to talk about volunteers and charities who've helped us out during this last 18 months. And as myself as a volunteer, we know the community spirit is here. We know people have been resilient. We also know some of the stigma around food banks. One of the themes that I chose before the pandemic, it was my time as Lord Mayor, was grassroots sports, grassroots culture, community, volunteers and well-being, which fits in well what's happened throughout this pandemic. As a volunteer with Good Gym, I helped out with over 70 prescription drops I did myself and over 800 that the volunteers in total helped throughout the city. For those people that were shielding, we also worked with mutual aid, with food drop-offs on a Wednesday night and at weekends, and with other charities. The vaccination programme has been a great success, and we're very lucky in Oxford. And I, as a volunteer as well, has helped out many shifts at the Leeds Health Centre. And speaking to over 3,000 people, it's good to hear some of their stories that people have said that they can get out, they can appreciate what they've got on their doorsteps, parks, open spaces. And also some people identifying on a sad note that the loneliness and isolation that's here and will continue to be here. And this is why we must help out and support our volunteers. As a local council, we've also led the way and got ahead of the curve with 6 locality hubs. So we've helped with grants and supports, partnership working, and with other charity organisations. It's also brought out some themes through climate change, active lives, parks and open spaces, people enjoying their allotments more. But what we need to do now, we need to push more for community funding, for community projects, and bring the community together. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, for your contribution to this event and for that speech as well. Thank you very much. Now let's hear it from Aisha Arun from Dialogue Society. Aisha Arun is a research fellow at Dialogue Society. Welcome, Aisha. Could you please share your thoughts and your work, please?
Yeah, thank you very much, Anil. I mean, we were together last year again virtually, and we're here again this year virtually. But just as you know, the speakers before me mentioned, we're kind of getting to the light at the end of the tunnel. So hopefully this will be our last virtual get together, and we can be in person next year. And thank you for the warm invitation, and also to the Dialogue Society and other partners in today's iftar for bringing us all together. I'd just like to share a bit about the Dialogue Society as an organization, just kind of touch upon the themes of what we do really, and why we're here today at an iftar and what it means for us and several of our volunteers to share an iftar. So the Dialogue Society has been doing these iftars for the past 20 years, since 1999. And we've been, initiating interfaith and intercultural dialogue iftars throughout the whole of the UK, open to all beliefs, all lifestyles. These opportunities have been a way in which we try to create an awareness of our commonality and also an appreciation for differences that we may have in society. Alongside these iftars, of course, we do organize various other faith and non-faith community projects. But these Ramadan iftars have stuck with us somehow as a kind of flagship project of ours, which, we continually try to revive and update and bring together different dynamics to hopefully make it a bit more fun, which I know today, we've got some things, exciting things coming up as well. So although we're not a religious organization, the organization is set up was set up by Muslim immigrants to the UK who were inspired by, the Islamic teaching that a dialogue and an appreciation and engagement with diverse communities is something foundational in our society, and it's important to kind of solve social issues and also for enhancing our community cohesion. And as those volunteers who build up the large bulk of our organization, Ramadan as a Muslim lunar month is a time in which these values of dialogue are heightened. And this is something that we've kind of come to coin Ramadanification, which I'll just touch upon. So when we say Ramadanification, what is it that we're talking about? We're talking about an embodiment of the values of Ramadan. And of course, what are those values? Well, there are billions of Muslims across the whole world celebrating this holy month. And it's a month of mercy, it's a month of forgiveness. It's also a month in which we aim to kind of foster a sense of regrounding ourselves, but also a time for reunification, reconnecting to God on a deeper level. But for Muslims, a reconnection to God, and for many other faith organizations, a reconnection also is kind of illustrated in reconnecting with our neighbors and communities. And this is, regardless of faith or none, which they may hold. And as Muslims, we're kind of reminded in our holy book, in the Quran, that diversity is intended amongst societies, and it's intended so that we get to know one another and strive for a better world. So during Ramadan, Muslims are expected to kind of follow the teachings of Islam and refrain from things like backbiting or things that may damage our community cohesion, perhaps. And Muslims are inspired to be shaped by Ramadan, and that's something we call Ramadanification, to kind of attempt to share this blessing and ease with others, this period of reflection, reunification, and spiritual growth. But this is where, for us at the Dialogue Society, Ramadan becomes more than just the lunar month it becomes a virtue. The more Ramadanified Muslims are, the more solidarity we believe will develop and connect with our communities. And I'd just like to tie this, term that we've coined with our spirit, rekindling the community spirit, and the theme of today. And like, the speakers before me have touched upon, and I'm sure it will be reminded throughout today, we all live our busy lives somehow. And this past year, with the struggle of coronavirus, we've realized that more. And of course, we've had examples from support that people have been providing for the NHS, for food banks, of the greatness within our society. But the virus didn't recognize religion, it didn't recognize race, it didn't recognize any things that could be, identified as things that mark us and separate us in society. But what we did see is we saw bravery, we saw solidarity, we saw altruism within our society. We saw people, checking in on their more vulnerable neighbors. We saw people, hundreds of thousands of people, volunteering to support our NHS. We saw the community spirit. And we hope this year will be an opportunity to contemplate on this value further, and tonight especially to do that, and look in different ways on how we can continue this in the post-COVID world. How perhaps we can rekindle our community spirit with lessons learned and implement them for a long-lasting community sense and feel within society and within Oxford. So just to kind of sum up, at the heart of our society is compassion for one another. And as the Dialogue Society, we hope to develop creative strategies, and tonight, this event being one of them, to build and maintain solidarity within our society. We believe dialogue is the simple solution. So thank you very much for being here today and engaging in this journey of dialogue with us. I'm sure we can develop connections that come from this evening as well further. So thank you very much, Anil, for inviting me, and hopefully there'll be more throughout the evening.
Thank you, Aisha, for those remarks, those reflections. And I hope we all do feel more Ramadanified, I believe is the coin term. Thank you very much. Our next speaker, before a short video break, is High Sheriff of Oxfordshire, Imam Monowar Hussain. Welcome to our virtual Ramadan event. Can you please share your thoughts?
Well, thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, and peace be upon you all. Thank you very much, Mahmoud, to you and to your team for organizing this lovely evening of virtual iftar. Such events are an essential part of rekindling community spirit because they lead to understanding between people and a sense of unity and togetherness. So thank you very much. I am today wearing two hats. First, of course, it's a great honor to be the High Sheriff of Oxfordshire. And second, of course, I'm an Imam. So in my short contribution, I'd like to try and weave the two threads together. But first, I really want to begin with my thoughts, and I think I express this for all of us in our prayers for the Indian community living in Oxfordshire, but in our country, who make such an important contribution in the NHS and in many other ways. And we're thinking of them and thinking of their loved ones in India, and praying for everyone really in India to be safe, and to also, inshallah ta'ala, that we all together as a human family can get rid of this terrible pandemic. Now, coming to my year as the High Sheriff, my theme for the year is celebrating Oxfordshire's heroes. And my inspiration for this was the many acts of altruistic kindness and thoughtfulness I had witnessed. Being an Imam in the NHS brought me face to face with a terrible toll of loss, grief, mental and emotional anguish that the COVID pandemic was exacting upon us. However, within that awful experience, I witnessed the dedication and love with which colleagues cared for their patients. There has also been the coming forth of the sense of community, care, and duty to look out for vulnerable neighbors and needed fellow citizens. As Mark said, this flowering, as it were, of volunteering and this emergence of new voluntary groups to help local communities. So this was my inspiration for choosing as my theme, Oxfordshire's heroes, because by doing so, by celebrating these heroes, we actually celebrate the values of selflessness, love and compassion for all. So second theme, of course, is we're in the month of Ramadan. We're almost just have a week to go. So the Ramadan is a month which the Prophet informed us in a tradition is a month of the community, a real sense of human family being together, a sense of empathy, to cultivate, to nurture empathy. And we do that really through being almost 19 hours without food and water. It does give you some sense of what it must be like for those people who really are in such a difficult situation in terms of their own well-being, in terms of food and so on. So it really gives you an empathy with those who are poor and who are needy in the world today, and also a sense of gratitude for how fortunate we are that we have so much plenty. We turn the tap, we have fresh water, but there are so many places in the world where they don't have fresh water at the turn of the tap. They have to travel many miles to get just a pot of water. So this also leads us to a sense of compassion for those who are needy, a sense of sharing. I know just locally, although we can't break fast together as a community in the mosque, 200-300 people together breaking fast. However, in the local neighborhoods, we've had people just sharing their food or sharing some gifts. So it's a month of sharing as well. We also have a great sense of charity, of giving in this month. Figures are that we have over 100 million donated by the Muslim community to charitable causes throughout the world. And it's a month of prayer, of course. The core at the heart of this month is prayer, collective prayer, corporate prayer. And that again is something that we can share with people of all faiths throughout the world. A community, a human community of prayer. So I suppose in terms of rekindling community spirit, the kind of values that this month gives, the kind of things that we've seen through this pandemic is a sense of empathy with our neighbors that we need to continue to take forward into the year in order to build a strong sense of community. Values of compassion, loving kindness, selflessness, reconciliation and healing, because this is the month in which we're encouraged to forgive and to reconcile with our families, with our neighbors, with those who we might have broken relationships. So it's about restoring those relationships as well. So I hope that we can carry these values throughout the year and hopefully use them to build a real deep sense of love and compassion and caring and kindness in our society. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Imam Munawar, for your reflections and being part of this special event. Thank you very much. We will now watch a short video prepared by Dialogue Society. Volunteers Afra Noor, Doro Dizgin, to perform marbling arts, which is also known as Ebru.
Hi everyone. I hope you enjoyed the art. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Great video there. Thank you very much, Afranur, for this magical experience. That was very nice. Now moving on to our next speaker. Let's listen to local MP Leila Moran for West Oxford and Abingdon. Welcome, Leila. Could you please share your experience and thoughts with us today about rekindling of the community spirit?
Well, first of all, Anil and the Dialogue Society and everyone here, thank you so much for inviting me and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I have to say, watching that art was just so mesmerizing and very meditative. And it has been such a mad year that actually I've realized how much I've missed everything to do with the arts, culture. It's not quite the same on Zoom, but that was as close as I've got in a long time. And I'm really looking forward to getting back to some semblance of normality. But above all, the thing that I've missed the most is, this normally would be us all together. And it's been so hard when you go around to see family or friends, especially with the opening up, not being able to give them an enormous hug because that's what you want to do. But regardless of all the barriers that have been with this country and with the world this year, I have to say I say this every year, but our community gives me so much to be proud of and new things to be proud of. It feels almost like every week, right from the beginning of this pandemic, when we saw the outpouring of love and compassion, how people who had never gotten involved in these kinds of things before put up their hands and said, I want to help, I'm going to go help someone else. And it does remind me of the way that people sort of pull together at the time of Ramadan. I used to live in Jordan. My mother is Palestinian, and while we're Greek Orthodox, we always used to sort of join into the iftar because it's really fun. And you'd go and you'd have incredible food and you'd gather as a massive family, and you'd often have 30, 40 people in a house, and you tell your stories, and it was a moment of feeling as if you were in a common endeavor. And I do see a parallel to what I experienced of Ramadan when it was an entire country doing it, to what we've seen with coronavirus, because what we've seen is actually people pulling together. And it's not a bad thing that we've reminded ourselves of how important those personal relationships are, how important it is that we connect with each other. And I think that when finally this is over, and finally when we can all meet face to face again, I hope that the long-lasting result of all of this strife is going to be a joy and also an appreciation for what we missed. And I hope that we'll never forget that feeling, and that we'll never forget what it was like to not have each other, and that that's going to hold us together even stronger after this than we were before. So thank you, Anil, for this. Thank you to everyone who is watching, listening, speaking, who was involved in the effort over the last few months, and it's been over a year, so I'm struggling to find the right word right now. Thank you for everything you're going to do, and thank you for inviting me this evening.
Thank you so much, Leila Moran, for your inspiring thoughts and everything you said. Thank you very much. We love the energy. We'll go on to our next speaker now. It's Jawaid Malik from Oxford Council of Faiths. Welcome, Jawaid. You are the Vice Chair of Oxford Council of Faith. Could you please give us some information about the work you do on the ground as faith communities and how we to rekindle the community spirit?
Thank you very much, Mehmet, for organizing this wonderful virtual iftar and giving me an opportunity to speak about rekindling the community spirit. The Oxford Council of Faith is a collective body of about 22 different faith groups and various denominations of the faiths. And our purpose is to bringing communities together and to see how we deal with issues that affect the faith communities. We've been operating in Oxford for the last, I think, about 15 years or so. So I'll come to the point of how we can rekindle the community spirit. When World Health Organization reported on 4th of January 2020 that there was a cluster of pneumonia cases in Wuhan, China, and then published their first disease outbreak news on the new virus the next day, no one could have imagined that within a matter of few short weeks, its threat had invaded all sectors of society around the globe. Since then, we've had some of the strictest guidelines put in place to protect ourselves, the sick and the vulnerable, and life as we know it has changed. But these sudden and obtrusive adjustments brought about some unexpected benefits too. For the first time in what seems like forever, people of all ages had something in common. They battled to stay safe and well and to protect those they loved from harm. What we are seeing now is the fruit of human kindness. When lockdown first began, normal social contact started to dissipate, and the loneliness and isolation looked set to infiltrate ever further. Local places of worship and community centers were forced to close their doors, but quickly reassessed their work plans and embarked upon community engagement programs, which served to fulfill the commitment at the very heart of their work ethos. Faith groups from varying religious affiliations, helped by an array of volunteers, delivered meals, shopping, and prescriptions to ensure the people's basic needs are being met. Their only gratification was that they are in people's prayers. And throughout all of this, individuals had to adopt their own ways of coping and drawing on what they believed in to see them through. Faith, by its very definition, outlines an inherent belief in something, whether it be religious, spiritual, or otherwise, and it would be a fairly easy assumption to make that in our helplessness to do more to control the rising tide of the virus, it may well prove difficult to have faith in anything at all. In drawing on this assumption, we must ask ourselves, how often during this strange and unsettling time have we heard the phrase, "Pray for our key workers and the NHS," or "I hope that you and your family are staying safe and well." In many ways, we still believe to continue to draw inspiration from the belief that by placing our faith in those who surround us, this will be the driving force that will guide us through. So if nothing else, this uncertain period in our lives has to some extent made many of us realize that it's not what we have, it's who we have. This commitment to ensuring those less fortunate, the lonely and the vulnerable, are respected and cared for in the manner which they wholly deserve should serve as a valuable lesson to us all. We are collectively trying to learn what this collective energy could do if we kindled it. What could a society achieve if it chose to live by a politics of interdependence? What new forms of care could we imagine if we continue to view our individual desires and well-being as it's inseparably bound to the desires and well-being of others? So community spirit and sense of identity are still present in modern society, but need a catalyst for their re-emergence. We need to fight against personal choice, personal risk tolerance, and personal comfort levels. We need to sustainably weigh the effects of our choices without burning out. We need to keep the love alive, to help each other, and to remain vigilant against the individualism of the pre-pandemic age. So love is the key, as love drives out hate. Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi says, "Love is the bridge between you and everything." And Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, says, "None of you will have faith until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. And in another narration, the Prophet says, until he loves for his neighbor what he loves for himself. Ramadan Kareem, and peace be upon you all.
Thank you very much for that, Jawad Malik, for sharing your thoughts and giving us some advice about love and faith, things that we definitely need in these times, and to keep them high. Thank you again. Now I'd like to invite Chancellor Susan Brown, the leader of City Council. Welcome, Chancellor. Can you please tell us about your thoughts and reflections on how to rekindle community spirits in Oxford City and the community in Reading?
Thank you very much, and Ramadan Kareem, and thank you to the Dialogue Society for the opportunity to participate in this second online iftar. I'm going to challenge your topic very slightly, because I don't think we need to rekindle community spirit. I think we need to build on the community spirit that we have seen in abundance over the last year. But I do want to talk a little bit about how we as organisations and institutions working with local people in our city can help feed that spirit further. The Lord Mayor a bit earlier on covered some of the many excellent volunteering that has gone on in our city, as well as some of the challenges that people have been facing, particularly in terms of isolation. And I think that's really important that we acknowledge that today. But I just really wanted to start by saying how extremely proud I have been this year to be leader of this city, a city where literally thousands of people volunteered to help their neighbours and their fellow citizens. And also, I have been very proud, along with the High Sheriff, who shares an employer with me, to be working in the NHS this year, and the compassionate care that's been shown by NHS, healthcare workers and care workers to our fellow human beings across the country and indeed across the world, I think has been quite extraordinary this year. So it is a matter of real pride, I think, that we can see how well so many of us have responded to this crisis. So through this crisis, we've seen people passionate about their communities, wanting to participate and support each other. And I think it's really interesting that when we took away the general mayhem and busyness of modern life, it revealed that there was a core of people in every community who were already organising, supporting and volunteering, and others were able to join them and build on it. They were ready and willing to do so, and then they found the people who could help them to do so, to connect with them and when they had more time to give to their communities. And we've been bound together by our common experiences this year as much as we have been divided by our differences. No community tried to put their own needs first. In fact, quite the opposite. Communities have metaphorically wrapped their arms around each other, supporting each other across cultural divides, celebrating different religious and cultural festivals with each other, and reaching out to each other to tackle common issues. We both want and must keep building on this spirit of shared endeavour as we move beyond the crisis of the pandemic and carry on with our work to rebuild our local economy, but to build it back better and tackle the enormity of the climate crisis. From a city council perspective, one of the key lessons I have taken from the last year is the power of working together with local volunteers as partners in their communities. We cannot have the entire lived experience of daily life in our localities as lived by every individual. And in particular, we need to reflect the needs of ethnic minorities and deprived communities in the work that we do. By working in partnership with local people, we can achieve much more. At the start of the pandemic, the City Council moved fast to put in locality-based teams to support the most vulnerable. And these were tasked to build partnerships with local groups and given the autonomy to act quickly to keep things moving forward. In a crisis, an amazing amount of normal working practice can be put aside, which is always interesting to see. Trusting our teams and letting them get on with things on the ground has made a big difference. They were able to listen and act, delivering regular small improvements that kept up momentum, essential when we're relying on the time and commitment of volunteer-led organisations. Together, we've built better trust and understanding on both sides, and we're connecting groups together on shared interests rather than working separately. Having to rely on technology to connect us has also enabled us to hear more from new voices. Nothing compares to face-to-face connections, and as those of us who've been delighted to knock on doors again locally will agree, but technology allows many more people to participate in the conversation. It's been noticeable that there has been more attendance at council meetings online than there is in physical presence. It can remove barriers like transport, travel time, physical access, and allow participation alongside caring responsibilities. So actually, for many people, it has opened up some of the opportunities. We've held vaccine webinars for minority communities. We've held community focus groups on our anti-racism charter. We've organised virtual town hall meetings. As we return to more face-to-face, we won't forget to keep up that online dialogue, to keep up the diversity this has allowed in participation. We need to do both. We've also seen how vital community spaces are as places for people to meet, to exercise, and to join people together. Through lockdown, we've continued to use our community centres for community larders, and we provided facilities for last year's grand iftar meal delivery, and the centres are the base for our local teams. We've worked hard through lockdowns to make sure that we've kept our parks and play areas open so that everyone has access to safe outdoor spaces. And I'm really pleased that we've been able to do that. I know some other councils have really struggled to do that. We're pleased to be able to reopen our leisure centres to support good physical and mental health. But we'll keep working with local communities to make sure these facilities are delivering maximum benefit for them. We already provide a lot of support for those on low incomes, but we need to make sure that these facilities are well used by everyone. Our partnership approach is not just to the grassroots of our communities, but also to other key partners in our city. I meet and work with major employers and organisations in the city to ensure that we're working together to provide all of our local people with more opportunities for employment, learning, skills sharing, and also cultural exchange. We share expertise. For example, University of Oxford nutritionists helped us ensure that food parcels didn't compound existing health inequalities, but provided well-balanced meals. We continue to encourage and welcome new organisations locally who pay the council's Oxford Living Wage, despite the costs of the pandemic. And we've led work with local employers to help our most deprived young people with skills development and routes to employment. And that will remain a really important part of our work in terms of building back better after this pandemic. We want our local businesses and employers to want to help us build stronger, more equal communities here in our city, and to work with us to deliver a zero carbon Oxford. Faith and community spirit often come together, and we've created an Interfaith Leaders Forum as part of our community services partnerships. Faith leaders are as much concerned with the practicalities of life for their congregations as their spiritual lives, and this forum has cemented partnership working to tackle issues of inequality and prejudice, as well as celebrating the contribution of our faith communities. So the question facing us as we emerge from lockdowns and return to busyness as well as business is how we keep the engagement with our local communities and work together to improve our city. We've seen barriers fall as we recognise our common concerns and our shared desire to live in a thriving community wherever we live. Going forward, we must continue to work together, to listen with respect, to act fast, to value small actions, and to pursue partnerships at all levels to build positive, resilient, and more equal communities. Ramadan Mubarak.
Thank you so much, Chancellor, for covering a range of different topics there. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. Now I would like to invite Reverend Stephen Croft, Bishop of Oxford. Welcome, Bishop. Could you please share your thoughts and reflections about the impact of the pandemic and how we can rekindle community spirit?
Thank you very much, Anil, and thank you to the Dialogue Society for this event. It's a real honour to take part. I've already learned a new word from Isha, which I'll take away, Ramadanification, which is really inspiring. Thank you. And I've also been inspired by the map behind you, Anil, which I'll come back to later. It's a real privilege to follow the speakers who've spoken before me. I'd underline much of what they said. And if, as I'm following Susan, can I say thank you to you, Susan, for your leadership of the city across the last year and the outstanding way the council has led us and helped us to work together. As I've thought about this evening, there's a wonderful story which isn't well known in the second book of Kings, sacred to our different faiths, which tells the story of how his eyes were opened. The words in 2 Kings 6 are, when an attendant of the man of God rose early in the morning and went out, he's stuck in a city, an army with horses and chariots was all around the city. His servant said, alas, master, what should we do? He replied, do not be afraid, for there are more with us than there are with them. Then Elisha the prophet prayed, O Lord, please open his eyes that he may see. So the Lord opened the eyes of the servant, and he saw that the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. Eyes are opened, and people see the help that there is available. And for me, that is something of a parable, an illustration of what has happened over this last year and of what needs to happen over this next year. Our eyes have been opened to the amount of help that there is around us, not only in the spiritual resources of our faith, but in one another and the resources we bring to our different communities in words which have been so eloquently described this evening. But I want to return to that map, which is behind Anil and which we're seeing through the evening. Oxford, in which we're privileged to live, is an international city. And it's international not only because of its citizens, but because of its impact across the world, which has been keenly felt and really increased through the months of this terrible pandemic. There's a saying which I think a lot of the organisations founded and which have their home in Oxford have taken as their slogan, which is think global, act local. Think global, act local. And all the community work that we do is the other arm of the support of the global thinking that goes on across this city, in which for hundreds of years, the sciences and the faiths have worked together and increasingly are working together for a global impact. The problems with which we'll wrestle in the city over the next year are also global problems. The pandemic has been referred to in India and elsewhere, the search for vaccine justice, the challenge of climate change, the challenge of poverty and inequality. All of these things, we will need to work together to think global, to act local, and to remember the immense resources which are around us in each other. A privilege to share in this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Bishop, for your inspiring words. Now let's turn to Professor Martin Percy. Martin Percy is the Dean of Christ Church Cathedral. Welcome, Professor. Could you please share your experience and thoughts with us today about rekindling the community spirit?
Thank you very much. I'm enormously grateful to you for this invitation to speak, and just want to say what an enormous joy and privilege it is to be part of this Ramadan event. I suppose one of the things that unites all the great faiths is the sense that religion is all about surrender and submission. It is the giving up of our will and our desire to the higher will of God in order that humanity will flourish and in order that works of justice and mercy and charity can be practiced. Ramadan is sometimes seen as a time for practicing almost excessive moderation, but in fact its real spirit is fundamentally about reserving things, going without, in order to make us think more about the justice and the charity and the fairness we can offer to others who are less fortunate than ourselves. In that sense, I think all faithful Muslims are seeking after God, the God who embodies justice and fairness and gentleness and tenderness and works of mercy. I used to teach in the other university in Cambridge, and when I was there, I often used to ask a question of students who were studying religion. Could they think of the things that united the world's great religions? And sometimes they would say something about texts or about attributes of God. But the answer I was really seeking was something to do with the religious founders. I'm thinking of Moses and Judaism. I'm thinking of Muhammad and Islam, of Jesus and Christianity, and of Buddha and Buddhism. There's one really interesting thing that unites those four founders. They're all raised by people who are not their biological parents. Jesus, at least according to Christian orthodoxy, is raised by Mary, his mother, but Joseph is not his father. The prophet is raised by his uncle, and Moses, of course, and the Buddha raised by relatives. What this tells us is what's been going on in this pandemic. It tells us something about the spirit of adoption that we are in turn supposed to adopt for others, to include people as our kith and kin, to count them as valued family members, even though they're not our bloodline, to treat them as our sons and daughters, mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles, and grandparents, as though they were ours. In other words, to extend the same hand of friendship, the same generosity in food and sharing that we would to our own families. Ramadan is a really special time. I look at the way that this is celebrated today and often wish that we could recapture some of that spirit in the Christian practice of Lent. But what I think is so beautiful about Ramadan is its capacity to inspire us to feast together, to share together, and to be reminded by doing so that this is how God intends us to live as a community, as people who are bonded by love, as communities that are actually not shaped by tribalism or by bloodlines or by petty rivalries or jealousies, but above all by the kinship that God longs for in this world. That, it seems to me, is what Ramadan teaches us. So may the God who gives us all of these things and gives us one another, may we, through dialogue and in this dialogue society, learn to be adopters of one another and adopters of those who are widowed and orphaned, who have no one to care for them. God puts them before us and says, in our city, in our county, in our nation, and in our world, these who have no one, these are my children too. Care for them as I have already cared for you. Thank you so much for inviting me to this, and it's just such a pleasure and privilege to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. Awe-inspiring speech. Thank you very much. We will now watch two short videos, music videos, I apologize, prepared by Dialogue Society, volunteers and friends.
Ya evening, all distinguished
I
guests.
yes,
I am
I
happy
could
to
have
be
done
here
that,
for
but I
this
didn't.
great program. Thank you so much, Dialogue Society, for this great opportunity. This is my instrument, which is called Ney. I will perform for you. Thank you again.
I hope you enjoyed the music performances there. Thank you so much again to Judith Silva and Tugay Yalchin for these special performances. One utilizing technology and one utilizing a stick. Our next panelist is the Superintendent Joe Kidman. Welcome, Joe. You are the police commander for Oxford City and work tirelessly to protect and support people in Oxford area. Could you please give us some information about the situation on ground and the support available for communities to rekindle community spirits?
Thank you ever so much, Neil. I do want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for two things. First, thank you for having me here at this event. It is an honour. And the other thing is to say thank you ever so much for the support that we've experienced from the community. To be honest, it has been really difficult at times policing the pandemic. The circumstances change quite quickly, and it'd be fair to say that different people have different views at times as to what rules are fair or not. So we're often, and my frontline colleagues are often left trying to sort that out. But actually, in the city and beyond, across Thames Valley, it might not always feel like that when we're out and about and we think, oh, should that person quite be doing that? But in reality, there's been a really high level of support and people really thinking of others and thinking about the impact of what they do. So I just wanted to share 3 words with you as I think about our theme of rekindling community spirit. I think one reflection actually is that in many ways, what we've seen is something of a new kindling of community spirit already over the last year or so. And I think the question is, how do we feed that flame? But I've got 3 words that I thought might be helpful to mention. And my first word is reflection. It strikes me that Ramadan comes at a very appropriate time. As we come out of COVID in this country, though we know that we're far from coming out of it elsewhere in the world, and India and beyond is very much in my prayers, and as we've heard, those of others on this call. But it is appropriate for this to be a time of prayerful reflection, a time to think about what's really important in life to us, and what's really important in life to our community. And I think reflection must be the starting point for how we re-emerge and how we rekindle a new community spirit, moving on even just what we had before. I think my second word would be compassion. What we've seen is immense compassionate action across our community and across our city. Actually, in tough times, what happens is that people don't just look after themselves, they look after those around them. We've seen that in the Muslim community, from arranging support to vulnerable families, to the use of mosques as vaccination centres. And we've seen this compassionate response across the different faith communities. For example, my own church arranging hampers for those in need, or indeed the Sikh community with their fantastically named SWAT, distributing food to the homeless and hungry. And we've heard many examples, and our Lord Mayor is such an advocate for volunteering, but we've heard of many examples of this. People moved to compassionate action, not just empathy, which is sort of caring without action, but compassion. Compassion is empathy in action, doing something about it. So reflection, compassion, and finally, my third word would be connection. Actually, the pandemic has shown us how we are actually already all very much connected. But it's also led us to seeking that connection. We've heard mention of the Oxford Hub, and that's somewhere that actually where I've had some community-based staff who have had to shield. They've actually got involved in for months at a time, got involved with the Oxford Hub, contacting and connecting with members of their communities in a different way. And we've also seen that in Oxfordshire Together, looking for that connection. Actually, in my street, we've had a WhatsApp group that was set up very early. That's led to the creation of a neighbourhood watch scheme. And that's meant that we've had some really practical support, which has connected local people of very different backgrounds in supporting each other. And I have no doubt that that will continue. So as we come out of lockdown, as I think actually we need to feed the new rekindled flame of community spirit, I do think that dialogue is essential. And for dialogue to be effective, I think it does need those same three things. It needs to be reflective, it needs to be compassionate, and it needs to build and strengthen the connection between us all. Thank you very much, and Ramadan Mubarak.
Thank you, Joe, for giving us some details and some key points there to keep in our minds. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to move on to Asad Polat to hear his reflection from a youth perspective. Thank you, Asad, for being brave enough to join us here today and share your thoughts about the impact of COVID and what could be done to promote community spirit.
Thank you, Anwar. Thank you very much to Dialogue Society and the Fellowship Educational Society for giving me this opportunity to be here among other distinguished guests and sharing my thoughts about the community during the pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic is undoubtedly one of the toughest challenges this world has faced. From schools being shut down to millions of jobs being lost and entire industries being ruined, the pandemic has caused lots of social and economic issues. In addition, this pandemic has made it difficult for communities to come together and to create a sense of unity. With everyone stuck in their homes during lockdown, it's felt like years since families and communities have been able to see each other. Although people may have not been able to get together, during the outbreak of this virus, many communities have given amazing responses and have completely sprung into action. Neighbors are looking out for each other more than usual. More people are volunteering for several organizations, including charities, vaccination centers, testing centers, and much more. Communities have shown their determination and resilience, supporting the isolated, excluded, and vulnerable individuals. This pandemic has also been extremely difficult for those of certain faiths and religions, with churches, mosques, synagogues, and temples all being shut down, as well as the cancellation of pilgrimages, ceremonies, and festivals. COVID-19 has been a test of faith for all. However, in some ways, religion has also helped people to stay strong during these tough times. Faith has played a key role in the pandemic. Many people have admitted that they have become closer to their faith, praying every day to keep healthy and safe, and also help those who have been affected by the virus. As well as this, churches, mosques, etc. have been turned into testing and vaccination sites and food banks for those in need, which have all helped in order to serve our community and recreate that sense of community spirit. There are many lessons that we can learn from this pandemic, one of these being the importance of our community and family and how vital it is as human beings to stay connected with one another. We have learned the importance of looking after and taking care of our neighbors. In Islam, we are taught the significance of taking care of our neighbors, and COVID has helped us to understand how important our neighbors are within our lives. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "He who eats his fill while his neighbor is hungry is not a true believer." And another hadith states, "The least of a neighbor's rights on him is that if he asks for a loan, he should grant it to him. If he asks for help, he should help him. If he wants to borrow something from him, he should lend it to him. If he needs him to donate something to him, he should do so. If he invites him, he should accept his invitation. If he gets sick, he should go and visit him. If he passes away, he should attend his funeral procession." Just from these two hadiths alone, the importance of having close relations and taking care of our community and neighbors is explained very clearly, and these tough times have made us understand how essential it is to have good relations with our community. Now, as we speak, huge amounts of progress is being made with millions of vaccines being handed out. We are slowly getting closer and closer to a COVID-free environment where people will hopefully be able to get together freely once again. As I have mentioned, there are many lessons that we can learn from COVID-19. However, I believe that the most significant ones are the importance of our communities and the fact that we as human beings are much stronger together. Thank you to all the organizers and speakers, and I wish you a very happy and blessed Ramadan.
Thank you very much, Asad, for sharing the importance of faith and for highlighting that neighbors are very important, not just only in Islam, but obviously for everybody, because they are those who are in our immediate surroundings. And I would like to go on to our final panelist for today. Now I'd like to invite Penny Forst from Oxford Jewish Congregation. Welcome, Penny. Could you please share your thoughts and reflections about the impact of the pandemic and how to rekindle community spirit?
Thank you very much, Anil, and thank you to you and to Mahmoud and the Dialogue Society and everyone else who has been helpful in organising this particular event. It's been most impressive, and I'm very privileged to be here. But, and there's a big but here, after all the words of wisdom that we've heard this evening, I feel that there's very little more to add. I've gone down what I've written down to say and ticked them off one by one as someone else has covered it. So I'm not going to apologize for repeating what has been said before, because what I'm going to do is go to the communities that I'm part of. I realize that I'm part of several communities, a faith community. My old work community stays together. The place where I live, Oxford in general. If you start to think about all the little circles of people that you know, you can gain real impetus and strength from being part of communities. But I'm going to focus for this on the Jewish community, which I know best, and my local street community, which I perhaps know equally well. For Jews, one of the most important features of being part of our faith is being a member of a community, not just in name, but as a participant. Jewish communities are multifaceted organizations, so that participation can involve a wide range of activities. For example, communal prayer, education at all levels, charitable activities, including fundraising and helping the needy, and social and cultural events. Members of the community don't necessarily join in all of them, but in the parts that are most relevant to each individual. But Oxford's special. If you go to a city in most parts of the world where there are sufficient numbers of Jews, the synagogues belong to one denomination or another, depending on the way in which they want to pray, because the various denominations do conduct their services differently. But in Oxford, we made a decision more than 50 years ago that we wanted to be a single community, an extended family, if you like, and we share our synagogue buildings and offer different denominational prayers running concurrently with each other when services take place. It demands a certain kind of tolerism and toleration, and you absolutely have to be part and parcel of it to understand what it means. And all our activities are run by lay people, by volunteers. We don't have a rabbi, quite deliberately, because that would be, as it were, tip it in towards one denomination or another. So individual members of the Jewish community take on the organization and running of all the activities as volunteers. But being part of Oxford Jewish community means much more than joining a synagogue for prayer. There are multiple activities, specific groups based on age, youth groups, a group for retired people. There are activities for everyone, regardless of age. For example, the choir, a dance group, or charitable activities like making food for needy people outside the Jewish community itself, or a vast range of education aimed at both specific and all age groups, once again run by volunteers. After more than 50 years as a member of the Oxford Jewish Congregation, I know that you have to be prepared not only to participate in communal activities, but also to help organise them when your turn comes round. And if You are brave enough to suggest that you'd like to see something different, something extra, then with the support of the community, you'll probably find yourself in charge. I know that to my cost. So for us, the challenge of COVID has been maintaining community spirit so that we could keep everything going. And that, I think, has been a feature of most formal communities as we've gone through the pandemic. And it's all based on practical action rather than anything else. To begin with, we were determined that we needed to keep in touch with each other. So we set up telephone trees to ensure that everyone had a conversation with someone else from the community at least once a week. We made sure that our database was up to date so people could keep in touch electronically. And if a member wasn't online, they'd receive all the information by regular post. And when special food or artifacts were needed for specific festivals, a delivery system was organised to ensure that everyone had what was needed. So, for example, at Passover, you could find young people cycling around Oxford delivering the special wafer biscuits called matzahs that we eat instead of bread during the festival. As someone put it at the time, the matzah fairies have arrived. Zoom educational activities for both the young and old went online, and so did our religious services where it was possible. And we ensured that time after was given to having a chat with others in smaller groups. There's a particular word for that when it happens around religious activities. It's called schmoozing. And schmoozing was built into everything that we did. People have to talk to each other. From all of this, you can deduce that rekindling our community spirit involved an emphasis on connection. I absolutely endorse what Joe Kidman had to say. The need for members to maintain their connection within the community brought participation from people we hadn't seen before at religious or educational events. Our numbers, most extraordinarily, went up. We need to keep in touch and, most importantly, where necessary, support each other, especially the most vulnerable, to provide as many events and activities for participation on Zoom that we could think of. Community spirit is improved when you can still do things together. And I'd also like to turn beyond our Jewish community, into the street in our local area. Community spirit has been rekindled once again by doing things together. Interestingly, how clapping for the NHS brought us out of our houses, and then neighbours stayed to chat, appropriately distanced, of course. Networks of help and support developed quite quickly. For example, as an older person on my street, offers of help with shopping or collecting prescriptions appeared through my letterbox. And the dog walkers in my local park began chatting to each other and even checking to see if people were okay. And a street WhatsApp was developed also. Once again, community spirit has been rekindled by communal activity. We are essentially a social species. I think that the lessons we've learned emphasize that. For the future, my commitment is to try to maintain the new activities I've become involved in and the old and new connections that I've made with other people across the city and within my own community. Rekindling community spirit has been a benefit of COVID, most unexpected and most marked. Maintaining it as the threat diminishes is the challenge of our times for the future. Thank you all very much indeed, and Ramadan Mubarak to all those who are celebrating this evening.
Thank you so much, Penny. Despite having close loved ones who are struggling with health conditions, you've joined us here today to promote community spirit, and we're greatly appreciative of that. Thank you very much. Would like to move on to, well, we finished tonight, but we're just going to finish with a short prayer from Imam Monawar Hussain. So hopefully uplift our spirits a little bit more.
Well, before I offer my prayer, Anil, thank you for your splendid sharing, to Mahmoud and all the team for a wonderful occasion. So thank you very much, and may you continue to flourish and continue your excellent work. In the name of God, the infinitely good, the most merciful, Lord, grant us, our loved ones, and the human family, good health, safety from all afflictions, especially the COVID-19 disease. Lord, bless and take care of all those serving your creation. Lord, grant all those in positions of leadership wisdom, a caring heart and foresight. Lord, grant us your love and the love of those you love, and grant us to be the people of love. Lord, grant us to live out this love in our communities, in our city, and the wider world. Amen.
Amen. We're now approaching to iftar time, and to close our evening, thank you to all of our panelists for taking part, and to all of our viewers for sharing this evening with us. We hope that you and your family keep well and safe. Please do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to follow our social media accounts for information of our upcoming events. Good evening to all. Happy and blessed Ramadan, and have a great evening.